Hi, folks. We're Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about some sort of talks or points of view, if you like, that are ping-ponging around the internet. That should motherhood be considered as a more viable or promising or worthwhile, fulfilling option for women? Should women be seen only as operational working units within the economy, or should they be seen as people who can be a part of developing and bringing about the next generation? In other words, motherhood. So now some have suggested that all we need to do is just say, yep, motherhood's the go, and suddenly women will go along with it, and I'm sure some would. A bit of propaganda lionizing motherhood, and that would cause some changes. But we need to really understand that all the enablements and support structures and facilities that existed for example, 1970, the high point, if you like, of the nuclear family, the things that existed then to support the idea of a family, and the male breadwinner, the mum at home with the 2.4, 2.5, whatever it was, kids, that sort of thing. Is that even possible given the wider structural issues relating to that? And we need to just go through some of those to understand that in order to make motherhood viable again, there's a number of things that are needed to be done, all of which the globalists will violently and vehemently oppose. So I would argue it's not even possible to look at motherhood in that way anymore. And so let's go with the first one. Well, the first one is the purchasing power of the paycheck. And as I've mentioned many times now, the first apartment I rented, it was less than 20% of my net income, net being the amount of cash I get in my hand after tax and other deductions are taken out. So it was 20% of that income went on rent. Now that exact same apartment today is almost 50%. This was like a compact one-bedroom apartment. It's almost 50% of the average wage. Now, if you want to have, say, a two-bedroom, reasonably spacious sort of two-bedroom apartment, when I upgraded, the next apartment I got was a two-bedroom apartment. It was, I suppose, 30, just under 1/3, so say 31% of my my cash each week, that out of my pay, my paycheck, 31% for the two-bedroom, and it was had a very spacious garage and storage area and so on. Now that today is 2/3 of the average paycheck is taken up by renting that place. So that'll just give you an idea of how much more expensive it is. Mortgages are the same. Whether it's to buy a house and pay a mortgage or to pay rent, you're looking at a really quite a bit more than someone on the average wage could afford. So if we look at the dad as the breadwinner, as it were, then there is no way that someone on the average wage, or anyone even anywhere near the median or the average wage, could afford to support a dependent wife and children. Now, this goes into really the only people that can afford to support a dependent wife and children, unless it's in the Badlands, that sort of thing, the really cheap Badlands where there's crime is through the roof and drug addicts are in your front, that type of thing. You could maybe afford rent there, but outside of that, there's less than 10% of wage earners could afford to have a dependent wife and two children, and even then they'd really struggle. They couldn't afford to be sick for a day. So the reality we face now is that 90% plus of the population requires two incomes if they're to even contemplate children, which means there can't be any stay-at-home mum. Motherhood is being subcontracted out to schools, and before and after school care, and so on. And that's just so that would need to change, because mothers hardly ever see their children. I know women, even on pretty decent incomes, like he's on 2.5 times the average wage, she's on 1.5 times the average wage, but given, and they've got how many have they got? I think 3 children. They must work all the time. She thinks that if she had only 1 child, she could probably work maybe a couple of days a week, but even so, it'd still be a bit of a struggle. And so really, the idea of the breadwinner paycheck, the purchasing power that it needs to have, that has to be addressed first of all. Another option is that the government just pays for everything if you have children, but that's hardly the issue here. So really, the paycheck, the purchasing power of the paycheck. Now, the purchasing power of the paycheck has reduced because the globalists have engineered a wealth transfer away from the Western, white citizen, particularly men, and transferred it into the pockets of big business and the oligarchs, the monopolists, the financiers, and so on. And there's also a high proportion of income is taken in as tax revenue. But so we'd have to have a transfer back away from the monopoly corporations. We have to break up monopolies, break up oligopolies, break up the big pharma cartel. There'd be break up the World Economic Forum. There'd be so many things. Return to sovereign, accountable government, and so on and so forth. So it'd have to be so many things that would have to take place in order to even create the added purchasing power, the purchasing power of the breadwinner paycheck to facilitate the stay-at-home mum. So again, the globalists would violently oppose that, but that would be essential to even contemplating this motherhood as a viable option. Similarly, there were other sort of tax benefits. I remember this used to annoy me as a young single guy, by the way. There used to be tax benefits for families. So if you had a stay-at-home mum and children, you would get a tax benefit allowance. So they would tax you less because you had other people to look after. As a young man, I didn't necessarily see it that way. So, just giving you some idea, I got, if my take-home, for example, my take-home pay was $100. There was a guy who had 4 kids, and his take-home pay was like $150. So he wasn't really paying a whole lot of tax, but he had 4 children. So, it's quite reasonable when I look at it now as an adult, but as a young man, why is he getting an extra $50? So I saw it probably quite a bit more selfishly then than I would now. But anyway, so the tax system would need to be changed. The tax structure would need to be changed. Again, the globalists and the leftists would violently oppose this. The idea that the government collects money and then disperses it to special interest groups, such as black lesbians, whatever. That's the preferred position of the leftists, and they're only stooges for the globalists, of course. So that would be violently opposed. Not that it couldn't be done, but it would be violently opposed. So those things would need to be looked at and need to be implemented. I don't think that maybe that the tax thing's possible, but the returning the purchasing power of the paycheck to 1970 levels, I doubt that will ever happen again. But and again, there would be the sort of forces that would be arrayed to oppose it are truly formidable. And if you look at the politicians that would have to make those decisions, all their relatives, their friends, their mistresses, their hangers-on and their flunky buddies are all being employed at very well-paid, prestigious jobs across all these financial companies, pharmaceutical, and so on. So all of their friends, their entire all their mistresses, everything would all be out on the street if the politicians did this. So no more super cozy real estate deals and no more super cashed up and money laundering Chinese investors to to buy your house at 10 times of what it's really worth. This sort of stuff. All those benefits would go. The benefits that are used to seduce the politicians in the first place to go along with the globalist project. But so there would need to be a lot of changes in those areas, and I doubt there's the will. I guarantee there isn't the will or determination to do it. Why should you help those, thankless pleb yob, hoods when they won't show their appreciation, but the CEO of the big financial firm will show his appreciation by giving your useless wastrel, sociology degree holding daughter a job as a $1 million a year consultant or something. So, hey, follow the money if you don't mind. So but there'd be a lot of societal sort of propaganda. The propaganda, the anti-male propaganda has been relentless. Marriage is a hellhole, oppression for women, all men are violent, child abusing, pedophile rapists, wife bashing rapists, and this propaganda has been absolutely sort of hysterical for decades now. And affirmative action, girls being given free passes to go through to senior high school and college, and the sociology degrees. You can be as good as any man. You're better than any man. You're morally superior to any man. And this idiotic, insane propaganda has again been around for decades. When in reality, the whole thing's been an artificial construct. At least with the breadwinning male, there was a large degree of organic naturalness about it. Whereas the society we see today is forced and engineered by ideology, not by organic development or natural sort of market type forces. So it's guaranteed to fail, what we see today. But how long that fail, like the Soviet Union or any of those sort of systems of government, they will fail. But it can take 50, 60, 70 years for that failure to come about. As any artificially engineered society it will fail. But anyway, so coming back to this idea of I mean, just on this affirmative action thing, women and minorities being gifted jobs and so on. I know, I own a share in a business, which I've mentioned many times. So I'm often going to meetings and having to deal with people in the companies. Now, if I know that the people we're dealing with are straight white males, I can be reasonably assured, not totally, I mean, there are still exceptions, I can be reasonably assured that certainly in the middle and upper middle management bracket, that the straight white male will be competent. They will have genuinely got their high school diploma, genuinely got their college degree. They've genuinely been promoted to the role based on competence or some reasonable, impartial, objective assessment as to capability and so on. So I can be reasonably sure I'll be dealing with people that know what they're doing. They're sensible. They understand the issues. I don't have to explain something in excruciatingly detail over a period of time, saying that we can move the conversation quickly, we can reach agreements, we can get on with things. And now that's kind of the person that I am. I'm not an affirmative action appointment. I worked hard to get my educational qualifications and to get my promotions and yada yada. So that's the sort of person that I am. So I'm talking to someone who shares my values in effect, or most of them anyway. CEOs are a little bit different now. Even if they're straight white males, they're more likely to be the flunky appointments of the financial boys that are pulling the strings. So they can still be useless idiots. Quite a few of them are actually. People are really on board with how many black lesbians they can hire today and this sort of thing. So they're not always any good. Some of them are, but there's still quite a few straight white male idiots at that CEO level, particularly if they've just been parachuted in there by, again, the financial sector boys, the Black Rocks and that sort of stuff. But if I'm outside of that and I'm dealing with women, even straight white women, the chances of them knowing what they're doing, being have been appointed on the basis of achievement and merit and this sort of thing. Chances even with white women are very low, and most white women, the majority of white women, are hopelessly over promoted. They've got no idea what they're doing. They behave like snot-nosed little children playing doll's house, and they just shouldn't be there. If you go then to the minorities, the non-white people, whether they be male or female, particularly if they're like gay or lesbian or trans or something, the chances of them being even 1% qualified to be doing the job is very slim. They're just there making up affirmative action quotas, and you can pretty much forget about doing business with it. It's so painful and excruciating. We've sort of talked about it internally, and we've sort of come to the view that when we're dealing with minorities, we have to hire a low IQ idiot to deal with them, because as soon as they see the white boys come into the room, straight white males, particularly at our age, and we're all in our 50s and or mid 40s through to late 50s, as we walk in the room with our sharp suits and knowing what we're doing, qualified, these minority people, they just go to water. They just crumble, and so we have to sort of hire a low IQ, brain dead hack 19-year-old just to deal with them, so they can at least be some sort of dialogue developed, because these people are so unqualified, and it's just it's an embarrassment. So this all needs to be changed. The whole affirmative action, the whole program needs to be unwound, and go back to merit. And again, the globalists will violently oppose this. Now, the propaganda that girls have been served up, even, and they're just eating up this propaganda. I don't know why. They're just eating up this propaganda that they're given in schools and universities and sociology courses that only a few years ago, women were not allowed to work. Women were not allowed to work. Hitler roamed every street stopping them. If any woman tried to work, Hitler would kill them, tear them limb from limb. And Hitler! And so women couldn't work, they're told. Women couldn't borrow money only just a few short years ago. Women weren't allowed to borrow money. If they tried to borrow money, Hitler would kill them. And they're given these stories that are just insane, outrageous untruths, not even close to the mark, or not a massaging of the reality. So according to, in the 1970s, women were not allowed to work. Did you? And these young girls, youngish, 25 years old, will tell you breathlessly, "Oh, we've got it so good now because, the patriarchy is still evil and Hitler's everywhere, but only a couple of days ago, women weren't allowed to work and they were killed by Hitler." And so they get these insane stories. So when I was a kid at school, at primary school, I think. Out of all the teachers that I recall, I think there were 2 men, and the one man was there for just a short space. I went to a number of different schools, but there wasn't. The headmaster might have been a man, but the rest were women. There was a guy. There was a teacher came for a while. His wife had died, and so he needed a job where he could look after children, so he could keep the same hours, as the children were at school. So he became a school teacher. I remember that. But I think that was more an aberration than a particular career choice he would have made. So there was, but otherwise it was all women. So apparently women weren't allowed to work. But so the propaganda is given to younger women today that women weren't allowed to work, and even claiming that it's sort of in the 1960s or 1970s women couldn't work. And I was at school in the 1970s, so I can vouch that pretty much all the primary school teachers were women. When I went to high school, the majority of teachers there were women. Not so much in the highest, in the like in the maths and the sciences, and in the more advanced classes, it was men. But in the arts classes or non-science classes, and in the sort of lower classes, it was all women were teachers. So and half the sport teachers were women. So there was this idea there was no women, where there were not trade unions, but like credit unions all around that freely loaned money to women, teachers and so on. So shop assistants, I remember, were mostly women. Like you'd go into, say, a department store, they were majority women there. So there's this idea that women weren't allowed to work and didn't work and all had to stay at the home. And, and the favourite comment that the activists make, so you want women to be pregnant and barefoot in the kitchen? Is that what you want, you damn Nazi? This idea that was the thing. There were plenty of women working at that time. Now, they typically were, either not married or widowed or something, but they were married to men who didn't make maybe sufficient income, or the children had grown up and they were returning to work, or they were working before they got married, or there were different sort of lifestyle choices going on there. But this idea that women weren't allowed to work or women couldn't borrow money was absolute utter nonsense. This propaganda that women have somehow been liberated from some evil patriarchy and this is somehow a wonderful thing is the propaganda that's doing the rounds. So we need to reverse the propaganda there. Again, that would be violently opposed by the universities, the teachers' unions, and so on. So looking at these things, looking at it in totality, is it a worth? Is it an honourable choice? A woman decides, look, I want to be a mother, stay at home with my children. I mean, if that's the choice, fine. But only a very tiny proportion of the population, or small proportion of the population, can afford to do that now. And if you want to also have the consumer goods, if you want the nice house, and you want the tree-lined street, and you want the good schools, and you want this and you want that, then we're looking at around 1%. Not even that. 1% of the population can afford that from their own income. Now, I'm not including people who've inherited a free mansion on the waterfront, or they've, I don't know, won the lottery or something like that. But if it's to be serviced out of your own income, then less than 1% of the population can afford that sort of lifestyle. If you want a very reduced lifestyle, a very modest house in a suburb where you could get a junkie shooting up in your front yard or something, that type of thing, then there's more people can afford that, but it's still not a lot. So I don't think it's possible to return to those days. But should it be a viable lifestyle choice? If women want to work, fine. If women want to be a stay-at-home mum with the kids, then that's fine too. I don't see why one should be denigrated and the other revered. Now, also, talking to young girl, this young girl down the road, she's a college kid, but she was giving me this nonsense about how the patriarchy and so on. I mean, she's doing a sociology course, so what do you expect? But I try to explain, well, what is it? What is better about today's society than how it was, for example, 50 years ago? What's the women are free, women can work, and women are allowed to own property, and they weren't allowed to. So straight away she goes into the lies. These things are simply not true, not even remotely true, not even tiny morsel true. Women are allowed, women with a property that husbands could buy and sell women. They couldn't. Where do you get that nonsense from? So lies. So the primary justifications for why we've got it so good today, or society is so much fairer today, is all based on the most hideous lies. Then women can choose to work, and women got a choice. And, women can have abortions. Women weren't allowed to have abortions. It used to be women were killed by Hitler if they tried to have abortions. And that's not true either. But then when it gets to the black lesbians are treated equally, so that's good. As long as if even one black lesbian is being discriminated against anywhere in the world, then no woman is free, and that type of nonsense that they Marxist claptrap they come out with. But when I point out that the purchasing power of the paycheck has declined by 2/3, so a woman who was working was just a retail shop assistant in like a grocery store or something, that she and her husband, who worked as a maybe he's a storeman in the storeroom, packing boxes in the warehouse or something. The two of them together could afford to buy a house and have children. She looks at me in shock to disbelief, because she knows that her paycheck, the average wage paycheck that she's got, she couldn't even dream of owning anything, beyond an iPhone or something. She couldn't dream of owning anything. So she looks at this and goes, wow, you're kidding me. I mean, wow, yeah. So you've got all this freedom and all this equality and all this equity and all this sort of stuff. And what have you got from it? You've got a paycheck that has 2/3 less purchasing power than it would have 50 years ago. And you've got college educational debt coming out of your ass. So you tell me what freedom do you actually have? You've got no choices in life. You can't afford to get married. You can't afford to have children. You can't afford to own property. What freedoms have you got? Or have you traded these imaginary freedoms, the black lesbian equality? Have you traded imaginary freedoms for the real freedoms, which was the freedom to choose your lifestyle? Because you can't do that now. As in your participation in the service, owning property, having children, etc. I'll just marry a man with big, but they're not around anymore either. The high income earning men are less than 1 in 100 income earners. So your chances of landing a man, whereas your chances of landing a man on a decently above average income who could provide very well, 1 in 4 men had those incomes. Now it's 1 in 170 or something men have those sort of incomes. So again, you tell me, what freedoms have you actually got in reality? And you just get a blank stare in return. You've been with Tacitus Day, your pushback channel, and thank you for listening.